Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll start this Avodah Zarah daf Ayin Vav. We are going to begin on Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, the fourth line from the top. We are now up to the last daf in this Masechta. Ramule Rav Amram Rav Sheshis. So he asked the question. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah in yesterday's daf Hashvudin when it comes to spits, Va'askawa Malabnan Ba'or. As we saw in yesterday's daf, what's necessary is that whatever way that it absorbed, so that is how you have to remove it in the koshering process. So since a spit which is used with fire hitting it, so therefore you need fire to kosher it. And that makes sense. But nonetheless, when it comes to kosher, we don't find that. So it says as follows: Vasanya Gabi Kadoshim Hashvud V'Askala Maglin B'Chamen. It says all you need to do is Hagola. All you need to do is submerge these things into hot water, and that suffice. It's not necessary to do libun. Says Rashi, Chitzol ben Basar Kaidish, that with this grill you roasted Basar Kaidish. So it's important to note that we only have a certain amount of time to eat certain karbanos, and in which afterwards it has the din of nicer, it's left over, and that becomes usr, and it has to be burned. Therefore, when you end up cooking basar chodesh the next day, the nicer iser karisu. We know that nicer is a serious offense, so apparently we have to kasher this in order to be able to remove anything which is absorbed in it, because anything which is absorbed in it is also considered to be kodesh, and that's a din nicer. So you have to kasher it. But for some reason, the way of koshering it, or in this way, not because it was not kosher, but it kind of was because it's nicer. But for some reason, all you need to do is hagala. You don't need to do the process of libun. So Amalei Amram Berei Ma Inyan Kadashim Eitzel Geoyle Abdul Chachavim. How could you compare the two? Hacha, when it comes to the din of Kodshim Haterabolu, what was absorbed into the shvud or whatnot, it was something which is mutter, a carbon, right? So maybe we're more lenient when it comes to that. All you need to do is hagala. However, hasam, when we're talking about an akko, misur bola, and that's why we're more strict and require something more. We require libun, and that's the reason why that's necessary. So, what do it mean? At the end of the day, okay, fine, the carbon was fine. It's a heter, but at the end of the day, it's talking about nicer, which is iser also. You're right. It doesn't mean that you don't need to do libun. It means you have to do other things too when it comes to kodshim. Because of the stringency of kodshim, we also require to rinse it out and also to basically cause it to be burned, or the scoring process. Says Rashi, Marika v'shtifa koimer la'oilim liflik to iser vadi libun. Boy, you definitely need to do the libun, like as we saw in our Mishnah, kishar b'liyas iser, like anything else that absorbs. El mitzvahs melachi b'kedashim u'mark v'shata b'mayim. We still need to use water and rinse it out, and also heat it up, etc. So, in addition to libun, there's a gezeres hakasa by kachim we're more strict. Amli abaya midami, you understand? Marika v'shtifa b'tzainin. When it comes to marika and shtifa, that's in cold water. Hagala b'chamen. So you're telling me, oh, you need hagala. So it says magalin b'chamen. Hagala is hot water, right? So when it comes to marika and shtifa, that's cold water. So Elo Emarabaya Yagadol of Reyu. Let one basically say the other. What does that mean? It says Rashi, Hagola Mamish Lifloid Misuran. Actually, you do need the Hagol of hot water. The Vadai Bain Bekashim Ben Begoy Abdichavim Turvayu Bina. You need both. Lifloid Isser Lavad Marika Vishti for the Kashim, the Inu Elamitzas Amelach. Okay. So Tana Hacha Libon Buadin La Hagola. So when it said that you need to do libun in our Mishnah, it's also necessary to require hagala. So Tana Hasam Hagala b'hodin libun. All these things are necessary. Apparently, not just by kashim, but even by also in our Mishnah, any isser that iser belua. Amalei Rabbi hachi listenin hulaku v'chada. Let it all be coupled together. V'lisnei chada beidach achriti, and it should be all said together. V'lema yagidol of rehu el amarav. So therefore, what do you mean? That it says it over there. So it says you need hagala, and the other one says you need libun. Why isn't just put everything together? If you actually need both, then it should actually say both in a Mishnah. El Omer Rava Kachim Hainu Tamayu. So why, in fact, maybe Kachim is different than the requirement of our Mishnah that says that Shud Askla is Mulabnin Ba'or. So Hainu Tamayu Kid Rav Nachman Omer Rabba Baravu the Omer Kol Yoyim B'Yoyim Nase Gil Chaveroi. That what happens in the Beis Hamikdash is every day there is a form of Hagala for the next day. Now, this is not a one-time business. When you cook, says Rashi, Shemavashlin Behen, when you're cooking up with this carbon, it never becomes nicer. The Einu Masik Liyos nicer, Ad Shetaseu Poilta B'Tashel Acher. This is constantly being used in the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, we don't say that which is... There's a din nicer by a carbon, it has to be eaten. But the kli itself, there's no din nicer because it's going to be used the next day, and therefore, whatever's cooked in each day, that which is already inside it comes out through the cooking process of the next carbon. So therefore, there's really never nicer over there. So therefore, because of that, we're much more lenient, and we don't require libun when it comes to kachim for that reason. So where it says, 1 second, tinach shlomim. That only makes sense if we're dealing with a carbon shlomim, in which you have more time in which to eat it. You have day, night, day. So you have the second day. So let's say you use the kli, and then the next day you use it for another carbon. So it's not nicer yet. But the kivan dulishtei yamim, as it says here in the Gemara, misachli. So you have 2 days. Mikamein ninu nice before it becomes nicer. Kahavi gil. So therefore that would be enough. No chatas. When it comes to a carbon chatas, you don't have as much time. It says Rashi Shahari kishabishul b'im l'machar. When you use this kli to cook it the next day, pull it blia miyom esmol. So the bliais will be removed from the day before to today, but it hasn't been nicer yet because shalom you can eat it on the second day. So that those blias are not nicer, but not when it comes to a chatas where you only have day and night. You don't have the next day. Kivan misachla kima vashel. When you use it again to cook, but in the chatas havi nicer. So the next day it's already nicer. Ki hader mavashel b'lamachar oshloma mochatas kapolit. So that's a problem. Ki hader mavashel b'lamachar when you're cooking oshloma mochatas kapolit nicer the chatas the in the b'chatas oshloma l'machar. So again it's a problem. So Amri lo tzricha t'chimavashel b'chatas inna. So 1 second. Maybe I went too fast over here. So ki hader mavashel b'lamachar, when you cook it the next day, o shlomim o chatas kapalat. So either of them get removed. Noisa the chatas the inna b'chatas v'shlomim l'machar. So Amri lo tzricha t'chimavashel b'chatas inna. That when you cook for a chatas today, on the same day you use the shlomim. So in other words, it's not like you only use it once in a while. It could be used multiple times, even the same day. So even though it's a chatas, so therefore it was used also then immediately afterwards for a shlomim. So therefore the chatas absorptions got removed all on the same day. So there's no noiser. The chatas l'macher v'shlom the esmol b'hadi adadi kamashim z'manayu. So it's fine. B'hadi mavashel shlomim l'macher. So in second, if that's the case, the hachi agol nami loli boy kasha. So the question is, why do you have to do anything? Because if you keep using these kalim, even for multiple different karbonos, for a shlomim and a chatas, and it's all happening a few times, let's say even a couple of times or a few times on the same day, so then why should you have to do hagol at all? Because it never became nicer. What are you doing hagol for? It's not. There's no isser that is absorbed because it's already being removed. So that's a kasha. Rapapo imer high karid, high low karid. actually one, because if it remains in use only temporarily, so therefore it gets harder inside the kli, as opposed to if it gets used more frequently, it doesn't have the time to get hardened into the kli, and therefore that's the distinction why you need liban or hagola. Says Rashi, really the iser does get removed. It's iser. So then you should require liban because it's iser. So ki Mastisin Lodami. So he says it's not comparable to our Mishnah. Why? The Gild of the Chachavim, Idil Mavashil who call Shaita, right? They're not always cooking, right? Sometimes they go get fast food, so they don't always use it. So therefore, because it wasn't always used, Umiskasha Habliya Batoichai. The bliyas inside stay there for a longer time because it's not used, and therefore because of that, in the nekas bakulu, it ends up like getting stuck in there for a longer period of time. They noach lifloit v'hagala. Just doing hagala won't do the trick. That's why you need to do liban. The whole shaitim of who you're constantly using it and cooking it over and over, even though things absorbed into it, but it doesn't have the chance to really stay there in a more permanent fashion to allow to therefore say that because of that you're going to need liban. No, it's much easier to get it out. Therefore, hagola is enough. So whether it's used regular or infrequently will depend on whether hagola or liban is necessary. Really, it's like we said before, is that when it comes to kodshim, it's behatera bola. And we said, what are you talking about? When you're polit, it's iser polit. So right, loim kinamrina mikar. So hacha hatera bola hachi isur bola. Or the kachashlach, we asked the question, what do you mean in the kapolit isur kapolit that you're removing nicer? So in the kapolit lo isli isur be'ene. But the isur is not be'en. It's not here. It's not extent. And therefore, because of that, like when it comes out, you don't even see it. So therefore, because of that, we're more lenient when it comes to the din of kodshim. Okay, says Rashi, Shibetoich daifni akli hi balua u'ma'oila mu'hukri suro. You can't see the iser. Okay, so how come by Avodah Zarah, who says that by the shvud of an akim you could see the iser? So that's a shtickle hard to understand what exactly is being said over here. Okay, all right, let's look at question 1. B'ma hechsherav hatira shel shipud shetzolabo basar kodesh. So how can you kasher a spit which is used of kodshim? So it's not clear that everyone holds the same thing. So definitely it says hagala b'reitzchen. It definitely requires you to do hagala, and it also says shtifa marika b'tzainin. So you need to rinse it out in also a very aggressive way with cold water. According to Abai, he says no. You also need liban in addition to all of this. Okay, all right. Let's see. Is there another question? Yeah, let's look at question TB30. Tanan gabi kodshim ashuraskal megalan b'chamin. Maduin tzarich liban kamoguli akum. So that's really not such an easy question, because it's obviously totally on different opinions. But this is TB30. Let's see what I wrote. Zeba beheter zeba be'isser. Okay, so that's like one possible answer. Hey mavashlam zeb b'chol yoyim v'loy os v'osili day nicer. Okay. Hey oisim et zed tamid v'zelo. What did I write over here? Korid, right? And I wrote, it doesn't get hard, these kalim. I think that's a pretty acceptable answer. It's a very difficult question, exactly how to navigate to that answer, but that's pretty good. I'm sure I got full credit for that. Hopefully I did. Okay, and then we complete this Masechta by the Ad Kama Malabnin. So how long... we want to understand now what exactly does it mean when you do liban? How long does it take? Vad kama malabnin. So Rav Mani ad shetashir klipasan, until literally the outer shell, the outer peel is removed. So at that point, or it gets so fiery hot, so then at that point that means you've done liban. Okay. Fine. And then we asked V'ketza Migalin, and how about Hagala with hot water? How do you do Hagala to kasher kli with hot water? So Rav Huna, Yor Katana B'toich Yor Gedoyla. So you basically have a big kosher pot, and in it you can put in a small pot and make sure it's completely submerged. So that big pot is filled with water. We make sure the water is boiling, and then you put it inside, and that's it. So Yor Gedolamai, how do you kasher that big pot? So Tashma Bahu Duda Dehavi Beirav Ukma, like this pot which belonged to Mar Ukma, Hadile, and he would put around it, as we continue to the last Amud, Gad Nafa Delisha Apuma, like you put like dough around the top above the lid. Says Rashi, Safa Shel Isa Savivos Pio. You put like this dough around it. Kadesh the Kabul Mayim Harbe, so it should accept a lot of water. The Yaver Hareitzchin al Safasa, and the water should like bubble over on the sides. The Muya Maya will get filled up with water. And then the artzacha, and then it'll bubble over. Some people would take a very hot rock and they put it inside the insert it into the pot so that it ends up overflowing, and therefore the outer part of the kli gets hit by some of the water. So Rava man chacham ma'avir levid ki hai milsa, who's wise to have done such a thing? Rav Ukva de Gavarabahu. Saver kabol kach poltai. He understands the reason why it's okay is kabol kach poltai. Ma boilai be nitzaitzais. Now polta nitzaitzis, because you could say, well, you didn't really submerge when you have a big kli. You're not submerging the outside, so the inside has water all around it, but the outside doesn't. But what caused the outside to not be kosher? Because you only used the inside of a pot, not the outside. But it's possible that it could have been splashings from the inside to the outside. So therefore, to kasher it, all you need is splashings on the outside, and that would be sufficient. Fine. So that's kapoil kach poilta. Ma bol b'tzenainis apolta b'netzaitzaites. So sakin shafa vihi tahara. So when it comes to taking a knife of an akum, all you need to scrape it off, and then it's tahira. So Amar Rav Ukva Bar Chama v'no'atzo asar pamim b'karka. You have to stab it into a virgin earth 10 times. That's what we're actually going to see now. Amar Rav Huna b'Reda Rav Yeshua v'karka sheno Avodah. A karka which wasn't used. So it's like a harder earth, so that whatever residue is on the knife is going to have been removed. Amar Rav Kahana uvasakin yafish she'in bagumois. This is talking about a good knife which doesn't have any nicks or hole or cuts, and therefore because of that, that's sufficient. Tani bihachi sakin yafish she'in bagumos. If it has no nicks and stuff, noatzu asar pamim b'karka, you can put it 10 times into the earth. Omer Rav Huna Berei, which is interesting. There's some people who don't know halacha. They think anything is something which is maybe not kosher, you stick into the earth. So you may see, like in a Jewish home, a bunch of these flower pots, and there's knives, there's all these things stuck in it. But that's probably the mucker of why they do it, but perhaps they're not really koshering it as they're supposed to. Omer Rav Huna Berei Rav Yeshua le'echel bot. It's also for cold. Says Rashi, Avodah was something for heat. Also, you can't cut with it until you actually do Hagala. The Kli Rishon, and we're dealing with the Kli Rishon. Okay, so again, if let's say this knife was used for cold, so this is the koshering process, that all you need to do is scrape it off and stick it into the ground 10 times, then that's good enough. But if it was used for hot at any point, then you actually have to do then you would have to takadu, as Rashi says, you would have to do hagala, okay, on the knife. Kiha de Mar Yehuda ubati bartuvi haviyasik made a shvar malka. So he was sitting by the shvar malka, who happened to be an ovid kachavim, an ovid kachavim. Aisa kamayu esraiga. So they presented an esraig. So pasak vahavle lobati bartuvi. So he cut a piece, and then all of a sudden the other guy started eating it. Now, why would he have done it? So he started. So and then hadar natza asara zimni ba'ara he's stuck in the earth 10 times. Pasuk Havli Lamar Yehuda Amli Bati Bar Tuvi Vahu Gavra Labar Yisrael. Who understand he's not a Yid. Amalei Mar Kimli Begave Mar Lo Kimli Begave. He knows you and he doesn't. This other guy doesn't know you. Ikadi Amir Malay Idkur Mayavante Beurta. I recall what was at night. So let's look at Rashi. So why did he first stick in the ground? So Rabbi Yehuda makir ani boy shehu parish v'yoychel davar iser. I don't eat something which is aser. Avol b'cha enu muksik shtehi parish kol kach. I didn't know they were so strict. Derech parsiim limsor nashim lachsanoim, that they would give over women to guests. Ukshagrin lehem b'layla. And then at night, Sha'avar Kibel Bati Rabbi Yehuda Kibel. So the question is, did they accept this person or not? Okay, that is an interesting way of ending a Masechta, which is also interesting that this Masechta ends right before Ayin Zayin, which we've seen many times. So that's the whole Masechta is Avodah Zarah. We end on the end of Ayin Vav Amud Beis, that we do not do. There is no Ayin Zayin. There's no Avodah Zarah in Avodah Zarah. Okay, it's probably something you can improve on its delivery. Question 2. So how do we see what goes in, goes out? So we see Le'inyan regarding the kli, that on the lid of the kli, the top of the kli, that the blias iser is only because of the splashing. So too, when it is removed to kasher it, all you need to do is the splashings through Hagala, and that is sufficient. Question TA 28. Heich machshirin sakin yafet. How do you kasher a knife? And let's see, did I write this over here? I did. And the answer is, of course, if it's cold, then you stick in the ground 10 times, and that's good enough. And you just rinse it off. If it's hot, then it needs Hagala. And this completes the Masechta. Hadnullah Chasayach Hasapayel. Slikala Masechta Avodah Zarah. And tomorrow we will continue a relatively short Masechta, not an easy one, Masechta Horius Adkan.